Hey, this is SJ, and I'm here with Dr. Kate, and you are listening to the Q Academy, where we talk about all things queer. So go ahead and grab a cup of coffee and get ready to learn. Well, I just heard you open your Coke Zero.
I know, I'm not going to do it again. I was like, oh, I better open this now.
Oh, I'm totally keeping that in for the episode.
Perfect.
Hello, everyone. This is the second episode of the Q Academy, and I am here with the ever intelligent and elusive Dr. Kate.
Hello, and thank you so much for tuning back in again. And yes, I will be well caffeinated for this episode.
And if you're wondering, we're really trying different situations in our audio technical skills. I don't know if I should say this, but I do have a background in audio engineering, but we are currently on the road traveling, and it is a pain in the ass when you don't have all of the equipment to record a podcast. And so I have put Dr. Kate in the bathroom. So they might sound a little echoey.
For folks that don't know, I also have a background in media, an undergraduate degree in said discipline, but I never in my life would I have thought that I would be sitting in the dark on a toilet in a hotel room in Baltimore, Maryland, talking to you about all the things.
Well, and the reason you're in the dark is because the fan goes on with the light, and that is not proper for recording this podcast. But we didn't want to wait because we have gotten such a great response from the very first episode. We've already been getting emails with some ideas and some topics that we're definitely going to tackle this season. And a lot is going on, and we wanted to share some really important information and have some important discussions this episode. So I just want to start. I am SJ. My pronouns are she and they. And I have with me
Dr. Kate, and my pronouns are she and they.
Awesome. Okay, so Dr. Kate, I've been doing a lot of research and I've been reading a lot of articles, and I thought it would be very proper for us to discuss same-sex marriage this episode.
Yes.
Something really important I want to talk about this episode is the codification of same-sex marriage.
Awesome. And I think, you and I have been having conversations about what the hell does that even mean, right? Because why do we need to codify something that the Supreme Court said back in 2015 is the law of the land? Well, in our sort of thinking, after the overturn of Roe v. Wade, and lots of people were concerned and confused as to why that could have even happened as well.
That is correct. So this has come to light currently because of the overturn of Roe versus Wade, and our lovely, lovely Justice Clarence Thomas, directly after overturning the 1973 Roe versus Wade decision that established a constitutional right to abortion, Justice Clarence Thomas discussed other laws that they would like or...
Well, actually, as a point of clarification, it wasn't after. It was in his majority opinion that he wrote about these things. It was in conjunction with the overturning. I think that's an important distinction.
Yeah, you're right. He wrote a concurring opinion about other due process precedents. And one of them was, along with the right to contraception, one of them was same-sex marriage.
Yeah.
And I believe there was even interracial marriage in there too, which ironic. And what a hypocrite, because who is he married to?
A white lady.
Yeah, let's say it all together. A white lady. So, I don't know or understand a lot of federal jargon. So I was running through a lot of articles, and I found this really great article in the Washington Post, and it was an analysis written by Laura Litvin and Gerald Dillard. And it really kind of talks about what the same-sex marriage bill in Congress would and wouldn't do. So I thought this would kind of be like a good stepping stone or a good foundational framework to letting everyone know kind of what does it mean to codify a law? What would it mean for same sex? What would it look like if we were successful in codifying?
Definitely.
So, codifying the law is really kind of looking at approving permanent legislation of a law. And when we look at our United States code, we have both public and private laws. And generally, public laws are codified. So if we think about the Internal Revenue Code and we think about a lot of criminal codes, those have been, or criminal laws, excuse me, those have been codified so they can't be changed, right? So this is kind of like cementing the law of same-sex marriage. What generally is motivating this, and like we said, the overturn of the 1973 Roe versus Wade decision is really kind of pushing this, because in that concurring opinion, Justice Thomas decided to mention that it's worth reconsidering other laws and possibly overturning them as well. One of them being the 2015 ruling on same-sex
Yep.
marriage.
And I think it's important for our listeners to note, if they didn't know already, that he specifically mentioned Oberfeld in his decision, in his statement.
Very specifically mentioned it.
Mm-hmm.
And so it was kind of like getting punched and kicked while we're already down, especially for those who are very much affected by abortion rights and the right to
Mm-hmm.
abortion. So now it's kind of like, cool, who's next on the chopping block? And that is exactly the kind of feeling that it puts in your soul, like that deep sickness or nausea that you feel. This is something that could be a harsh reality, right?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And I think contextually, it's important for us to think about, like, in the day to day lives of people for whom this doesn't immediately affect, they don't necessarily understand the significance of this sort of thing. Because if it's not something that they've ever had to consider before, the idea that this could be something that we are concerned about is extremely difficult for them to wrap their brains around.
Correct, correct. So let's give a little bit of background
Mm-hmm.
to the ruling of same-sex marriage. So in
Mm-hmm.
1996, Congress passed the Defense of Marriage Act, or DOMA.
Right. Thank you, President
And this,
Clinton.
yes, so this stated that states weren't required to recognize same-sex marriages conducted in other states, so states that the individuals did not live in. And marriage was defined under federal law as a union between one man and one woman.
Yes.
Okay, so that's important to know.
Mm-hmm.
For a time, there was a second provision to the act that denied same-sex spouses most of certain or most federal benefits. So this was taxes, social security payments. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
so piece of shit for all of us, really, when we
Well,
think
and
about
I
it.
think this is where, other states like Vermont, which was the first state to recognize civil unions, which really highlights the separation of church and state, and the act of marriage as being a religious or faith-based action versus civil union, a secular legal act of two individuals in a committed consensual relationship.
So if we use that, Dr. Kate,
Mm-hmm.
what really is the difference between a heteronormative and a non-heteronormative marriage?
I think that is ultimately the question, right? Because when we get people who are upset about the concept of same-sex marriage, and the argument is that, they often go back to biblical statements of, marriage is defined as between one man and one woman, and they cite specific liturgical verses ultimately, what if we look at what marriage, and when we take that out, right, in the concept of two people coming together, like even with what we call a common law marriage, right, in those
Right.
instances, those are proven or determined to be two individuals cohabitating and sharing a certain amount of resources and assets. And those individuals are just granted those rights automatically based on certain standards that are established within that community or within that state.
Correct, correct. So, I can really kind of personally speak
Mm-hmm.
to understanding, or maybe experiencing both a heteronormative and a non-heteronormative marriage. A little bit about myself. I've been married twice. The first time I was married to a man, the second time I was married to a woman. The details are not important, but I never once experienced any problems, any issues, any type of significant choices when I was married to a man.
Right. Everything
All
was
all the
essentially
things
assumed, right?
exactly. Everything was assumed. Insurance was easy to get, benefits were easy to get. Never, oh, is this your brother? Oh, is this your uncle? Those types of things. Like, oh, is this your friend? Never had any of those assumptions. It was just kind of like, oh, husband and wife,
Even
married
though
to a
he was older
woman.
than you.
Sure, he was. He was significantly older than me. No judgment there.
No, not at all.
Uh,
But like that's
yeah.
people could have otherwise made that assumption is where I was going with that, right? Like
Yes.
he
Yeah.
was
That.
significantly
Yeah.
older, and that assumption could have been
Correct.
drawn in other
Sure.
contexts.
But it wasn't, right? It absolutely wasn't. Married to a woman, and that's a tough road to go down. Oh, is this your sister? Oh, are you related? Oh, you're not best friends. Oh, you want benefits. Oh, I mean, it's like constantly having to come out every second of the day, right? Or every place that you go. And a lot of us in the queer community experience that all the time.
Right.
But when you're out with your spouse, it's having to do it in a different manner. Oh, this is my wife. Oh, this is my partner, over and over again, and it gets exhausting because we have to think of that in a heteronormative marriage or relationship. You don't have to say this is my boyfriend, this is my husband. It's just assumed, and you don't ever have to constantly come out and say this is my relationship. So let me give you an example. My ex-wife had surgery, was in the hospital for a week. It was really serious surgery. I was able to stay in the room with her. The night before her operation, the nurse came in and said, "Hey, I know you guys are lesbians, but I need her to take a pregnancy test."
Right.
So, um, at first I thought it was funny. I was like, "Oh my God, I can't believe that she said that. I can't believe the nurse said that." And I thought it was funny. But as I thought about it, I thought, would she have added that for anyone else?
Right.
Was there a different way that she could have said that? Like, look, I know it's probably seems ridiculous to you, but I need you to take a pregnancy test.
Well, but I would even
Why did
argue,
she?
why was the assumption that you guys couldn't have been pregnant?
Exactly, because nowadays, there are many ways of same-sex couples to have children.
I mean, even back then there were. I mean, there's
Yeah,
there's
yeah,
always
exactly.
been ways.
Yes, exactly. So there was that assumption that, oh, they're gay, they're missing one of the significant components of being pregnant, sperm. So I'm just going to call them out for being gay and just make it funny. Well, I mean, it was uncomfortable, right? But I just feel like if there was a heterosexual couple in that hospital room, it wouldn't have happened. It wouldn't have happened.
I mean, that seems reasonable to me. And it's
Yeah.
unfortunate that you guys did have that experience. And because in essence, that was an example of a microaggression. She did not mean to be biased or to seem, inappropriate, but ultimately that was a form of a microaggression.
It really was. So Dr. Kate, can you talk a little bit more for our
Mhm.
listeners about what a microaggression is and
Oh,
how is that
yep.
a little bit different than a possible discrimination?
Yeah. So um, there are big differences between what are called microaggressions and what are actually referred to as macroaggressions. So the act, for example, of potentially overturning Oberfeld would be an act of what's called a macroaggression. Because what that is that is a big picture sort of legislative government action against a group of individuals, typically of the minority status, because we don't usually perform any sort of aggression or macroaggression against the majority, right? Microaggressions are much more subtle. They're often unintended or incidental forms of aggression or ultimately oppression that are typically done as a result of an unconscious bias. So it's the subtle things like, I know you guys are lesbians, or if I'm walking down the street as a person with a disability and somebody gives me an extra wide berth or kind of pulls their kid a little bit closer, or the kid says, "Hey, mommy, why does that person look like that?" And the parent goes, "Shh, shh," right? The intention is not to be harmful, but that act in and of itself could be harmful and is harmful because it continues to other the individual.
Okay, I think I understand now. So let me see if I can get this straight. Earlier
Okay.
tonight, we were going to dinner, right? We
Yes,
were
yes.
having dinner and we were sat in a booth that had the handicap symbol on it.
Yes,
And I'm only
ironically.
bringing this up because, yeah, ironically.
It literally
And
just
we were
happened.
kind of, tonight it happened. And so I wondered, and I said to Dr. Kate, do you think it's because, they saw us walk in and they figured, oh, this person has a visible physical disability. I'll set them in this booth, because we were trying to figure out what was different about the booth. And we realized that one of the seats you could remove for a wheelchair, right?
Which is wonderful
Sure, of
for our
course.
folks that rely on that type of, not transportation, but for that mode of mobility, right? That form of mobility, that is
Right.
great. But ultimately, the
Correct.
best thing would have been to have all of the booths have a removable bench, or to not have booths at all and to just have tables where chairs could be removed.
Or could it be the fact as well as the employees know which booths the seats can be removed from,
Correct.
and then just not have a large blue and white handicap symbol at specific tables?
Right,
Because to
because
me, that says othering
exactly, which
you,
is
for
why
example. Right.
when we were talking about it, I go, well, it would have been better if, this wasn't here and I placed my hand over the
Right.
sticker, because I mean, it's not like they couldn't have said, we were one of like 3 guests in the entire restaurant, like 3
It was pretty
groups.
empty.
So it's
Right.
not like they couldn't have sat us at any other table, but they sat us at
Right.
that table, which it was a lovely table. It was very comfortable, but
Sure.
that does raise the question of, did the individuals at the restaurant see me enter the restaurant and say, "Oh, this person needs this seating arrangement"?
Yeah, this person needs an accommodation, and this is
Mhm.
where we're going to see them. Of course, it was supportive, and they thought, they were giving you an accommodation, but that essentially was an example of a microaggression.
Exactly.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much for explaining that for
No
our listeners
problem.
and for myself. Okay, so we kind of went off on a little teeny tiny tangent, but I think it's well said, um, and needed. But
Mhm.
let's kind of go back to do the discussion on the Defense of the Marriage Act.
Yeah.
So we talked about it being passed in 1996, saying that if you are a same-sex couple and you are married in a different state than the one you resided in, that states weren't required to recognize that marriage, as well as talking about the federal benefits of same sex spouses. Now, fast forward to
Mhm.
2013, when the Supreme Court struck down the provision. First, Defense of Marriage Act. The
Okay.
provision was struck down in the United States versus Windsor,
Oh, right.
and
Okay. Yep.
DOMA became very dormant, right? Okay.
Mhm.
The law is still on the books, however.
Mhm.
Okay, so this is something to know. And this is really kind of interesting in this Washington Post article I was reading.
Okay.
Because when I talk about disability studies, we talk about sterilization of individuals with disabilities and
Mhm.
how it was really a fucking thing. And yep, I did it the first F bomb of the Q Academy, because this is some serious shit,
Well,
everyone.
but the important
Okay.
thing for people to know is that law is actually still technically on the books. It's just not enforced right
Exactly.
now.
Exactly, right? So many states did reverse sterilization laws of those with disabilities, but there are many states that have not done anything, the law just remains on the books but dormant, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's not practiced, but it hasn't been taken out of the system or off the books, so to speak.
So essentially, what you're saying in that instance is that, let's say, Sheriff Smith comes into power in some capacity, and this individual decides that they would like to now enforce the sterilization law. They technically could.
Oh, they definitely technically could because it's still on the book.
Right.
Which makes me feel like somewhere, sometimes a family makes the decision for their child to have them sterilized.
Mm-hmm.
I
It's
bet you it
possible.
still happens, because a lot of these individuals that were sterilized, it was against their knowledge, against their consent. The families made the choice, just like our institutionalizations of
Mm-hmm.
individuals with disabilities. So, yeah, I absolutely believe that it could happen. I'm sure somewhere in the United States, it still does happen. I think
Mm-hmm.
that would be really interesting actually to look through, but yes,
Something for a future discussion for sure.
exactly. So, all right. So moving forward, if the Supreme Court overturns Oberfell versus Hodges constitutional amendments, and this is a for word quote from the
Okay.
article. Constitutional amendments or bans on same-sex marriages would become enforceable again in at least 29 of the 50 states. So the Movement Advancement Project, which is they are an advocacy group for LGBTQIA plus rights. They say that if the Supreme Court would overturn the law of same-sex marriage, just like they did with Roe versus Wade, it would allow at least 29 of the 50 states to ban same-sex marriage.
Right. And well, let's back up. As of right now, there are 19 states on the books currently discriminate against individuals who identify as LGBTQ plus, whether that's through housing laws or employment equality, or other seemingly perceived civil rights. There are 19 states that currently do not honor these individuals. So this would be an additional. There's probably some overlap among those states, but this would probably be at least another additional 10 states.
Yeah, and I do believe there is some overlap, and I don't have those exact figures, but they're startling and it's sickening, to be honest, that in
Mm-hmm.
2022 this is what we are looking down the scope at, that could come up our path and really change our lives for those of us that are in the queer community. Okay, so speaking to that, Dr. Kate, in
Yes.
1996, a poll was done. And
Mm-hmm.
when the DOMA law was signed by Clinton, 27% of Americans reported that they would recognize same-sex marriages and same-sex marriages should be valid under the law, right? So that was in 1996. Fast forward to July 2022, a Gallup poll showed that now 71% of Americans agree with same-sex couples being allowed to marry.
So
So
that's
significant
what, a
increase.
50%, no, yeah, 50% increase in the last just under 20 years.
I mean, I'll take it.
Mm-hmm.
It's not perfect, but I'll take it. At least it
Well,
wasn't a decrease, right? I'm trying
well,
to
but
look at the
this also
glass as half full.
but this also speaks to the imbalance of power currently on the Supreme Court, that they are not representing a majority of individuals. They are representing a minority view, but because that minority view is so loud, and our current system is so imbalanced by this sort of evangelical right, that this could even happen.
It's very true. Yeah, it's
Yeah,
very true.
and I think this also raises some of the arguments that individuals like Pete Buttigieg and others were calling for, looking at how to overhaul the Supreme Court, perhaps adding additional seats, whether they had some that were elected or, looking at should this be a lifetime appointment? Because truly, if you are looking from a legal judicial perspective, an individual's personal religious beliefs should not factor in. Because again, if we have a separation of church and state, which is explicitly written into the Constitution, this should not matter. This shouldn't even be up for discussion.
I agree. However, how do we feel about the legitimate separation of church and state? It's not happening.
No, it's never happened.
No, exactly. Yeah, it's stated and in the Constitution.
It's a great idea,
However,
but it's never been practiced.
Sure. No, of course not, because politicians bring religion into everything.
Well, it's not even religion. I mean,
Unfortunately.
we can even go back to Declaration of Independence, that all men are created equal. Well, they didn't actually mean all men. They meant all white male landowners
Sure.
are created
Sure.
equal.
Yep. Yeah.
Landowners. That's an important
Oh my
piece
God.
too.
Okay, so let's talk about the status of where the bill is now. Okay.
Okay.
So mid July, the House of Representatives passed the legislation to codify the same-sex marriage law on a 265 to 157 vote. And this is huge. And people really weren't surprised that it passed the House of Representatives. There were 47 Republicans voting with the Democrats in support. Now, the scary part is it's going to Senate. And Senate is split 50-50 between the two political parties.
Well, it's actually 50 to 48 with two independents who tend to caucus with the Democrats.
Oh, well, I mean, that's excellent news, because we also have Susan Collins of Maine and Rob Portman of
Other way
Ohio.
around. It is 50 Republicans, 48 Democrats, two independents.
Okay.
So that's what makes it 50-50. If those independents decided to go with the Republicans on this issue, we're toast.
And I think we need 10 Republican votes to prevent the bill's opponents from killing it using the filibuster.
That's correct.
As I was previously saying, we do have two Republicans that are co-sponsoring the bill in the Senate, and they are having talks underway on some type of amendment that could bring more Republicans on board. And that is currently Susan Collins of Maine, snaps to Maine, and Rob Portman of Ohio, snaps to Ohio.
I think it's really important for our Maine listeners to be continuing to contact Senator Collins' office. Because she has since come on the record following some of the more recent Supreme Court appointments, acknowledging that saying that she was misled and would not have supported some of their nominations had she, quote, known, because the way they have acted since coming into or being sworn into the court was different than what they alleged they would do through their appointment hearings.
Wow, I had no clue.
Yeah.
That's horrible.
Yeah. So she needs to, in my opinion, continue to get ongoing support from her constituents for the codification to make sure that she does not waver.
Well said, Dr. Kate. Can we also give snaps to Senator Tammy Baldwin, who is a Democrat from Wisconsin? Senator Baldwin is the first openly gay woman and first Wisconsin woman to be elected to Senate, and she is really at the forefront of codifying the marriage equality law.
That's awesome.
Yeah, I think for those that are in their youth, let's talk maybe 6th grade and higher, that are starting to learn about social studies, right? Starting to learn about how our government runs, the House of Representatives, the Senate, Congress, all these federal laws, everything that's involved. I think this is great representation for queer youth, because when I was a kid, I didn't understand any of it. I didn't care about any of it, because I was being a kid. But I think it's such an important thing that's happening right now that I really love seeing this representation when it comes to members of the queer community.
Well, that also speaks to the progress that has been made in terms of our ability to be visible compared to when we were younger.
I think it's important to say that the name of this law that was passed in the House of Representatives last week is called the Respect for Marriage Act. This is not only going to focus on same-sex marriage, but it's also tackling interracial marriage as well. So in 2022, this is something we are talking about again, right? We are talking about interracial marriage. What is going on?
It really boggles my mind. I cannot wrap my brain around the fact that we still have to be talking about this, to be entirely honest.
Yeah, and I really don't know what to say. I think that as the season goes on and we talk about more diversity, equity, and inclusion, to have representatives of the queer community that are racially diverse. I don't know. What's the best way to say it, Dr. Kate?
I think it goes back to the concept of intersectionality, the fact that none of us are just one thing.
Correct, correct. But I just think, we need more representation on the topic, more discussion on the topic, because if we're tackling same-sex marriage, interracial marriage, what's next?
Ultimately, I think it goes back to, again, going back to the concept of what this country was ultimately founded on, or the ideal, right, of, quote, all men are created equal. Really, it's, if one of us does not have equity, then none of us has equity. And what do we do to support one another and bring up those that do not have the same supports and systems in place as other people?
So you actually say something really critically important. And even if I didn't say that or emphasize how important it is what can we do or what do we do? And we have to reach out to our state representatives in whatever capacity we can. And Dr. Kate has some really great apps that they use for calling senators. Because here's the deal, I want to do what I can, but I get nervous on the telephone ordering a freaking pizza, right? For some reason, even though I wasn't raised in the age of digital ordering, internet didn't come out until I was in high school, I still have problems having a conversation and telling someone on the phone my order or talking to the doctor's office, right?
Welcome
So
to social anxiety.
is that what that is? Okay, we're gonna have to talk more in depth about that. But I think that if I had something to help me, something to tell me what I can say to my senator if someone answers the phone on the line, right? Because they're like, contact your senator, call this number, call that number. I don't know who's going to answer, but I really want to, give them the 1-2 punch kind of with my words. So, Dr. Kate, you have been talking a lot lately about some apps that are incredible to kind of guide you through the process and to give you some type of script.
Right. And I only know of two. There are probably more, but the two I most frequently use are ones called ResistBot, and the other one is called 5Calls. Now, ResistBot is like super easy because it's all text based. You log into the app and they give you a code that you text to a number, and then it asks you a series of prompting questions like, do you want to sign on to this legislation, and do you want us to tweet out that you sign on to this legislation, and would you please forward this information to X number of people in your contacts? You don't have to talk to anyone. It's literally done all in your phone. The challenge with it is that there are only certain issues currently up there that may or may not be applicable to you, but this could be a way for us to expand the reach of that particular app. The other one, 5Calls, is a little bit more, I'm going to call high touch, because that one you actually do need to call. So with that one, what you do is you select the issue that is of importance to you, and you click on contact my representatives, and it will have the phone numbers with pictures and names of your representatives in your area. You click on the respective individual. In my case, one of my senators is Senator Jean Shaheen from New Hampshire. So I can contact Senator Shaheen. I click on it, click call, and a script will pop up. And all I have to do is read the script. And then it asks me if I made a contact with an individual or if I left a message. So that's a super easy way to do things. Currently, right now, they don't have anything in either one of those apps about codifying same sex marriage, but you could use the scripts that were used to codify the abortion ban, right? Excuse me, to codify abortion legislation and just insert the information about same sex marriage if that's something that you're interested in doing.
Okay, I think those both are incredible. I'm definitely going to make sure that the names of both apps are in our show notes. So if you're interested, you can find out more information. No matter what platform, if you have the Apple platform or the Windows platform on your phone or your computer, we'll make sure that we link that information as well.
And I do know that they're available both for Android devices and Apple devices because the individual who introduced me to said apps uses an Android platform and I'm an Apple user.
Awesome. So Resist Bot and 5Calls are the two apps that you use. Okay, perfect. We'll make sure they're in the call notes. I think that's great because you don't know what jargon or vocabulary to use. You don't know who to call. And it's just really awesome that it's more than just the Same-Sex Marriage Act, right? So the Marriage Equality Act. It's other state-led laws and acts that we can support
State
as
and
well as
federal. There's a
federal.
bunch right now in both of those apps around environmental issues, climate change, gun control, legalization of marijuana, all sorts of issues.
That's incredible. Thank you for sharing that, Dr. Kate. Okay, well, I want to make sure that everyone checks out our show notes. We have updated our email address. There was a slight error in that, and that is my fault. Sorry. But as SJ, I'm here
So
for the people.
what is the new email address?
The new email address is theqacademypodcast, all lowercase letters, of course, at gmail.com.
Excellent. And we've also gotten some awesome news that we are quickly being added onto all of the platforms for which you can download and listen to podcasts. We have submitted to Apple Podcasts and Google, and hopefully we'll hear from them within the next few days.
Yep, they have a great system of aligning with new podcasts, and so we are waiting, but we are on RSS feed. If you want to go to our website, which is qacademy.buzzsprout.com, you can click on any of those links, as well as we just got added to TuneIn plus Alexa. So if you have an Alexa device, you can say, Alexa, play the Q Academy podcast. How dope is that?
And
right?
It will.
And we also are on Spotify. So as we get added to more podcast platforms, we will let you know as always, and just keep you well informed. I really thank you for listening. Again, please email us if you have any advice, any feedback. We love hearing from our listeners, and we already have been hearing from our listeners, and it's been absolutely amazing. Dr. Kate, thank you so much for joining me again this episode.
You are most welcome.
And thank you, our faithful listeners, for listening. I want to thank each and every one of you. I want you to stay safe, be kind to your mind, and please remember you're loved and make someone smile.